On a September morning, when the university campus still carried the scent of wet grass after the night's rain. My school was in the eastern United States, with ancient red brick buildings interspersed among rows of maple trees beginning to turn golden. That day, I arrived at my philosophy class earlier than usual, headphones in my ears, holding a cup of coffee so hot that I had to switch hands constantly. I had no idea that, in just a few minutes, all my ordinary days would change color. Callum was sitting in the third row, near the aisle. I noticed him not because he was particularly striking. Actually, Callum looked very ordinary. Brown curly hair, a gray hoodie broad across the shoulders, faded jeans. But there was something about him that made the space around him brighter, as if an invisible light had switched on right there. As I fumbled for a seat, he looked up, moved his backpack inward, and said, "You can sit here." His American voice was deep, clear, and warm. "I'm Theo," I said, sitting down, my heart beating faster than normal. "Callum," he smiled. A smile not too radiant but enough to make me forget what I was about to note down. We didn't talk much in that first class. Just a few glances, a few accidental hand brushes when reaching for the handouts. But when the bell rang to end the class, Callum turned to me. "Do you drink coffee? The place near the library makes decent ones." I nodded so quickly that even I found it amusing. In the days that followed, coffee became a habit. We sat at the wooden table by the window, watching students pass by like an endless flow. Callum was majoring in communications, loved photography, and often told short stories about road trips with his family as a kid. I was studying literature, loved writing but never had the courage to say it out loud. One afternoon, when the sun poured down on the steps in front of the library, Callum handed me his camera. "You try taking a shot. I don't know anything about cameras. Just shoot by feel," he said, standing behind me, his voice close to my ear. I pressed the shutter. The first photo was of Callum's hands, sunlight highlighting his long knuckles, the light accentuating the fine veins. Callum looked at the photo, smiling faintly. "You see the world softer than I do." I didn't know how to respond. I just knew at that moment. My heart softened. We started studying together. At first in the library, then in my dorm room where the window overlooked a wide lawn. Callum often sat on the floor, leaning against my bed, book open on his lap. I sat at the desk, pretending to focus but actually always noticing his steady breathing. Once, when I read a poem aloud to Callum, he closed his eyes. "Don't stop," he said. "Your voice makes me feel at peace." I didn't stop, but that peace also carried fear. I'd liked boys before, but always kept it hidden. In a crowded, seemingly open university, that fear didn't disappear. I didn't know what Callum thought. He was comfortable touching my shoulder, resting his head on me while watching movies, but never said anything that crossed that blurry boundary. One evening, we walked back after a late class. Streetlights stretched our shadows side by side. Callum told about the first time he realized he liked boys. A fragmented story, said as if it were no big deal. I listened, my heart pounding. When he fell silent, I knew it was my turn to say something, but the words stuck in my throat. "What about you?" Callum asked, stopping. I looked at him. The light made his eyes brighter. "I think I'm like you." Callum didn't say anything right away. Then he smiled. "That's good then." That night, back in my room, I lay staring at the ceiling for a long time. I thought about how Callum entered my life. Not noisily, not hastily, but making everything brighter. I didn't know where love would lead, didn't know what hurts lay ahead. I just knew that days with Callum made me look forward to mornings. After that night, things between me and Callum didn't exactly change. There was something placed between us, invisible, untouchable, but clear enough that we both avoided crossing it, while also unable to pretend it wasn't there. We still drank coffee together, still sat next to each other in class, still studied late. But the unconscious touches began to linger half a beat longer. The silences were no longer awkward, but heavy. One Friday evening, Callum invited me to a small party with his friends at the West Dorm. I hesitated. Crowded parties always made me feel out of place. But Callum said, "I'm there." Just 4 words, but enough to make me nod. The room was full of the smell of beer and pizza. Indie music played just loud enough. Callum introduced me to everyone, his hand lightly on my back, as if casually, as if familiar. I realized I stood very close to him the whole time, laughing more than usual. At one point, a friend teased, "You two look like a couple already." Callum just smiled, neither denying nor confirming. My heart pounded so hard I had to down my beer to steady myself. Near midnight, I stepped out onto the balcony for air. The cold wind cleared my head. I was wondering if I was imagining too much when the balcony door opened. Callum stood there, holding 2 cans of beer. "You okay?" he asked. "I just need some air," I replied. We stood side by side, looking down at the empty parking lot. After a long while, Callum said, his voice lower than usual, "That day, when you said you're like me, yeah, I've thought about it more than I expected." I turned to look at him. The light from inside cast half his face in brightness, the other in shadow. "And what do you think?" "I think," Callum said slowly, "that I don't want to pretend anymore." There was no kiss right after that sentence. No climactic background music. Just a silence so thick I could hear my own heartbeat. I wanted to say something smart or at least certain, but instead, I took a very small step toward him. Callum didn't back away. He raised his hand, touching my wrist, his fingers warm. "If you don't want," I nodded. "Ido." Our first kiss wasn't perfect. Lips touching lips, a bit awkward, a bit trembling. But when Callum exhaled softly, when his hand tightened slightly, I knew I wouldn't forget this moment. The world seemed to quiet down, leaving only us and the feeling of being chosen, of being seen. We didn't talk about that kiss right away. The next day, everything proceeded as normal: class, coffee, library. But a new intimacy seeped into every gesture. Callum sat closer to me. I no longer avoided his eyes. That night, studying in my room, Callum lay stretched out on the bed, his head on my lap. I stroked his hair, a simple action that made my hand tremble slightly. "Are you scared?" Callum asked, eyes on the ceiling. "Yes," I admitted honestly, "but I'm more scared of losing you." Callum was silent for a moment, then held my hand. "Me too. But love, even starting gently, never takes a straight path." A week later, I heard Callum arguing with his mom on the phone in the hallway, his voice low, tense. When he saw me, he hung up quicker than usual. "Everything okay?" I asked. Callum nodded, but his eyes avoided mine. That night, he didn't text like always. I lay in bed, watching my phone light up and go dark, my heart heavy. I began to understand that loving someone isn't just the bright moments. It's also the shadows they carry. A few days later, Callum said he needed time. "Just a little," he said, voice tired. "I don't want to hurt you when I'm still messed up." I nodded, though inside something cracked. We still met, but the invisible distance returned, this time more painful. I wondered if I'd stepped too fast or loved too much. But even in those hardest days, I realized one thing. Even when Callum pulled back, the light he brought remained. And I knew, if given the chance, I'd choose him again. Because the days with him, bright or dark, were the days I truly lived. The time Callum needed wasn't measured in days or hours, but in shorter messages, nods instead of questions, and times I convinced myself that silence was also a form of care. I tried to keep my life normal, going to class, doing assignments, working part-time at the small bookstore near the gate. But everything had a thin layer of fog over it, as if someone had dimmed the world's brightness by one notch. One rainy afternoon, I ran into Callum at the library. He was standing at the photography shelf, flipping pages more out of habit than focus. I was about to turn away, but Callum looked up just in time. Our eyes met. A brief beat, enough for me to see both fatigue and something like anticipation in them. "Can you sit with me for a bit?" he asked very softly. We sat at the familiar table near the window. Rain drew long diagonal lines on the glass. Callum twirled his coffee cup in his hands. "My mom wants me to come home this weekend," he said. "She doesn't know about me, about us." I swallowed hard. Do you want to tell her? Callum shook his head. I don't know. I'm scared if I say it, everything will break. But if I don't, I feel like I'm betraying myself. He looked up at me. And betraying you. I placed my hand on the table, near his, not touching. I don't need you to do anything right now, I said slowly. I just need you to be honest. Callum exhaled, as if releasing a burden. I want to be with you. I just need to learn how not to hide. That weekend, Callum went home. I stayed at school, burying myself in work but my mind drifting to the worst assumptions. Sunday evening, when my phone buzzed, I nearly dropped it. Callum's message. I'm back. You free? We met on the lawn behind the dorm. It was cold, stars sparse. Callum looked different, as if he'd grown a bit in just 2 days. He talked about family dinner, his mom's innocent questions, how he'd almost said it but stayed silent. I listened, without interrupting. I'm sorry, Callum said. I know silence can hurt too. I nodded. But you came back. Callum smiled sadly. Because I realized, no matter how scared, I don't want to lose you. He held my hand. This time I held back. We didn't label our relationship right away. No boyfriend, no stickers. Just two people choosing each other every day. We cooked together in the dorm kitchen, arguing over salting before or after, then bursting into laughter. Callum photographed me when I wasn't looking, reading, tying shoelaces, dozing off. You look peaceful when you don't know you're being seen, he said. I started reading my writing to Callum. At first short pieces, hands shaking. Callum listened seriously, then said, You have your own voice, Theo. Don't hide it. Those words stayed with me, like a promise. But happiness is never completely serene. One evening, while watching a movie in my room, Callum got a call from his mom. He went out to the hallway. When he returned, his face was pale. My mom wants to visit, Callum said. Next week. The room seemed to shrink. What do you want me to do? I asked, fearing the answer. Callum was silent for a long time. I don't want to hide you, but I'm not ready to introduce yet. I took a deep breath. Then I'll give you space. But I need to know. Am I being pushed out? Callum came over, hugged me. The hug was tight, trembling. No. You're my home right now. That week felt like a month. When Callum's mom arrived, I avoided his dorm area, staying late at the bookstore. I hated feeling like I had to disappear to make others breathe easier. But every night, Callum texted, sharing small stories, reminding me I wasn't forgotten. The day his mom left, he found me right away. We sat on the library steps where it all began. I didn't tell her, Callum said, voice choked. But I didn't lie. I said I'm in love. I looked at him, heart pounding. And I think that's the first step. I rested my head on his shoulder. Not a grand victory, no fireworks. Just a small step, but in the right direction. That night, we lay beside each other. Window cracked open. Callum whispered, The days with you make me brighter. I smiled in the dark. Me too. The semester flew by faster than I imagined. Maple leaves covered the paths. Then the weather turned fully cold. Callum and I grew used to the rhythm of us. There were mornings I woke first, watching him sleep, faint sunlight filtering through the curtains touching his lashes. I often thought, if this moment is all I have, I'd still choose to stay. But college life doesn't let anyone stand still. Callum got an email about a short exchange program in California, 6 weeks, starting right after winter break. When he told me, I saw in his eyes the light I knew, the light of dreams. You should go, I said before fear could speak. Callum looked at me surprised. You don't.
I'm scared, he interrupted, smiling.
But I don't want to be the reason you miss out. The weeks before Callum left, we tried to live busier. Longer walks, slower kisses, deeper memories. One evening, we climbed onto the roof of a low building on campus, where Callum often photographed sunsets. Cold wind, deep purple sky. What if I change? Callum asked, half joking, half serious. What if I come back different? I looked at him. I'll be different too. But if we still choose each other, different is okay. The day Callum left, I saw him off at the bus station. The hug lasted longer than usual. As the bus rolled away, I stood there for a long time, until only thin smoke lingered in the cold air. The days without Callum, I learned to face the emptiness. We video called every night, but time zones threw everything off. Some days Callum was too tired to talk much. Some days I was jealous of the sunny skies on the other side of the screen. I started writing more short pieces, unsent letters. Writing about how missing someone isn't just lacking them, but lacking the version of yourself when with them. Week 3, we argued. A small thing, a read message not replied, a careless word. But distance turned it into a deep cut. Maybe we're trying to hold on to something not lasting, Callum said, weary. I was silent for a long time, then said, if you want to let go, I won't hold on. But don't decide out of fear. The call ended in silence. That night I didn't sleep. I realized love isn't just being together, but learning not to lose yourself in the fear of being left. 2 days later, Callum called back. His voice different.
I'm sorry.
Panicked. I don't want to lose you. I closed my eyes. Me neither. But we need to trust each other more. We set small rules. Speak truth when scared. No punishing silence. Don't let distance decide for us. No grand vows, just repeated choices. When Callum returned, the campus was covered in thin snow. I waited at the bus station, hands freezing. He stepped off, suitcase trailing, and looked at me as if finding something lost. We hugged amid the passing crowd, ignoring stares. California was beautiful, Callum said later as we walked back. But I didn't see myself there. And me? I asked. You're where I want to return to. Things didn't naturally become perfect after that. We still had off days. Times Callum withdrew when family called. Times I doubted my worth. But we learned to stay in hard conversations. Learned to apologize. Learned to forgive. One evening before finals, Callum set down his camera, looked at me for a long time. You know, he said, before meeting you, I thought light was something to capture. Now I know, light is something to live by. I didn't respond right away. I just kissed him. A slow kiss, deep enough to remind us both we were here, right now. And perhaps that's the best way to love. Spring arrived unannounced. Snow melted into small puddles reflecting the pale sky. Trees on campus sprouted tender buds, as if someone had switched life back on after a long sleep. I realized I was looking forward to the future in a new way, no longer as fearful as before. Callum and I entered the new semester with a gentle caution. We didn't rush to prove anything to anyone, including ourselves. But there were afternoons when Callum photographed for his final project. I stood behind, watching him focus, and thought, I'm loving very deeply. Then an email came. From my department. A competitive summer creative writing program, 8 weeks in New York. I read the email 3 times, heart racing. This was the opportunity I dreamed of but never dared name. When I told Callum, his eyes lit up before he could hide the worry. You have to go, Callum said almost immediately. This time I was the one hesitating. I'm scared of repeating. Callum came over, rested his forehead on mine. We've learned more now, and I trust you. The days preparing for summer carried excitement and heaviness. I wrote like never before, coffee going cold, fingers aching. Callum read everything I gave him, marking the parts he liked. This section, he said, is you speaking most truly. We promised not to let distance erode what we had. But promises are always tested. New York was noisy, fast, and waited for no one. I lived in a small room overlooking a narrow alley. Car horns the backdrop for nights writing till dawn. Classes pushed me to limits. Reading aloud, debating, letting others touch the most fragile parts of me. I began to believe in my own voice, but also began to doubt. Was I changing too fast? Callum called every night, even tired. Some days he just looked at me through the screen, silent. I miss you, he said, and I heard the loneliness in it. I wanted to go back, to hug him, but I also knew I needed to stay. Week 5, someone in class, Evan, approached me. Evan was smart, sharp, and looked at me with clear curiosity. One evening after class, Evan touched my arm while talking. I pulled back, but my heart raced. Not because I wanted, but because I realized I was being seen in a new way. That night, when Callum asked how my day was, I hesitated. Then I told the truth. Callum was silent for a long time. "Do you like him?" Callum asked. "No," I replied immediately. "But I like the feeling of being recognized." The honesty made the air heavy. "I'm scared," Callum said, voice small. "Scared you'll find that world big enough without me." I closed my eyes. "You're not something I carry out of fear of loneliness. You're a choice." The call ended imperfectly. That night, I wrote a long letter to Callum, unedited, unhidden. I sent it before regretting. 2 days later, Callum sent a photo. It was me at the winter bus station, light snow falling, smiling toward him. "I choose you every day," he messaged, even when scared. I cried in the small room, in the city that never sleeps. When I returned to school at summer's end, Callum picked me up at the station. No flowers, no fanfare. Just a long, solid hug. I felt him not as a fragile support, but as someone standing with me. We walked through the familiar campus. Everything looked the same, but I knew we'd changed. That night, Callum led me to the small gallery in his department. On the walls hung photos, light, shadow, moments. In the corner was a photo of me, reading, sunlight falling right on the page. "I want to capture what makes me stay," Callum said. I held his hand. "And I want to write about what makes me return." We didn't talk about the distant future, not yet. But lying beside each other, hearing the wind outside the window, I knew. We'd gone through trials not to prove love, but to learn how to keep it. And the days with Callum in a very quiet way. Senior year came like a strong wind, bringing decisions, goodbyes, and questions that couldn't be delayed. Callum and I moved into a small apartment off campus. Not romantic like movies. Tiny kitchen, creaky wooden floors, window overlooking a parking lot, but our first space truly ours. Living together wasn't always gentle. Callum was messy in his own ordered way. I was too tidy when stressed. We argued over electric bills, schedules, trivial things hiding bigger fears. The future was approaching fast. But then there were Sunday mornings, brewing coffee, opening windows, and being silent together. One evening, Callum got an email from a photography studio in Seattle. Full-time internship, potential to stay. I read it with him, heart sinking. Seattle was far. This time, not just weeks. "What do you think?" Callum asked, voice careful. I looked at him, the one who'd learned not to hide, who'd chosen to stay even when scared. "I think you should go," I said slowly. "But I also think we need to be real about what that means." We talked all night. No beating around. No vague promises. I had an offer for an MFA program after graduation. Uncertain but possible in Boston. 2 paths pulling us different ways. For the first time, I saw the future not as an obvious shared story. The following weeks, the apartment's atmosphere changed. We loved each other more, as if knowing time wasn't infinite. There were nights of slow intimacy, unhurried, just breath sinking, skin remembering. There were long silences. I learned intimacy isn't just touch. It's staying when it's easiest to leave. The day Callum flew for the interview, I saw him off at the airport. "Hug lasted, no tears." "Whatever the outcome," Callum said, "I want us to be honest to the end." I nodded. To the end. The call came a week later. Callum got it. I smiled, genuinely, and felt a thin crack in my chest. We opened wine that night. No big celebration. Just a toast to dreams dared to name. Then my letter came. MFA Boston. Starting fall. I read it over and over, hands shaking. Callum hugged me, kissed my forehead. "You deserve it." We had 3 months to decide. Stay together, someone sacrifice? Or love enough to accept 2 cities? One afternoon, we walked the campus one last time as students. Leaves falling thick. I stopped at the library steps. "What if we try long distance for real?" I asked. Callum was silent, then shook his head slightly. I'm scared we'll hold each other with memories, not presents. Those words hurt, but true. I breathed deep. Then, if we have to choose? Callum looked at me, eyes not avoiding. I choose you living true to yourself. Even if that means know me by your side. I cried. Not wailing. Just steady tears, like light rain. We hugged a long time, amid the campus where it all started. Graduation day, we stood side by side in the row. When my name was called, Callum clapped loudest. When his, I shouted till hoarse. We took one last photo, 2 smiles. We parted not because love ended, but because we loved enough not to hold back.
No hatred. No vague promises.
Just one word. Thank you for choosing me. For the time we could. I moved to Boston. Callum to Seattle. Occasionally we sent a photo, light through a window, a street segment, a new book.
No meetings. No clinging.
I wrote. Callum photographed. We lived. A year later I received a package. Inside was a photo book. The last page was the old photo me at the winter bus station. Handwritten. The days with you taught me how to see. I set the book down, opened my laptop and wrote, not to return but to be grateful. Life after college wasn't as gentle as I'd imagined. Boston greeted me with gray rainy days, long workshops, and a very real loneliness. I lived in a small rented room, walls thin enough to hear neighbors laughing. I wrote a lot but not always well. Some days words poured. Some days I stared at blank pages like an old acquaintance. Familiar but no longer mine. Callum was present in my life quietly. No daily texts, no long calls. Just small dots of care without demands. A photo of sunlight on wooden steps in Seattle. A short line, clear sky today. I didn't reply right away. Not because I didn't want to, but because I learned to let spaces exist without pain. That winter I finished my first manuscript. Imperfect, many broken parts, but mine. My advisor read it, silent a while, then said, "You're writing about light after hurt." I nodded. I didn't name Callum, but I knew. The night I got positive feedback, I opened Callum's photo book. I lingered on the last photo. Some loves don't need to continue to persist. They change shape, don't vanish. Realizing that made me calmer. Spring, I got an email invite to read at a small event in New York. I hesitated, then agreed. The familiar noisy city, but this time I walked differently. Slower, steadier. The reading ended in warm applause. As I stepped off stage, my phone buzzed. Message from Callum. "I'm in New York. Coffee if you want." My heart raced, then slowed. I looked at the window, saw my reflection, no longer the trembling student. Okay, I texted. Spot near the park. Callum arrived first. Still the familiar gray hoodie, hair shorter. When he stood, I realized we'd learned to stand alone. Short hug. "You look good," Callum said. "You too," I replied, and realized I didn't need more. We talked about work, new projects, cities become home. Comfortable silences. No one asked, what if? No one needed apologies. Parting, Callum touched my wrist lightly. Old habit. Unbound. "I'm proud of you," he said. I walked away, not looking back. Not because I didn't want to, but because I'd carried enough. That summer, I got a short story accepted. I called my mom. I cried. I celebrated alone, then emailed Callum, without nostalgia. "Thanks for once being the light." He replied, "Always." Time continued its work, not erasing, just arranging. I loved someone else slowly, not like Callum. Didn't need to be. I learned not to compare, not to use old shadows as measures. I learned happiness isn't staying the same, but allowing change. One late fall day, I returned to the old school for a workshop. Campus the same, red bricks, maple rows, library steps. I stood at the old spot, where it all began, and smiled. I didn't wish to return. I was grateful for passing through. On the train back, I opened my laptop and wrote. Not about parting, but about brighter days when two choose each other without knowing where it leads. I wrote about the courage of loving fully, and the kindness of letting go at the right time. When I placed the final period, outside, the sky darkened. I felt at peace. And I knew this story was closing, not with loss, but with growth. Many years later, when this story no longer stung on recall, I understood why days with Callum were always brighter. Not because everything was beautiful then, but because I'd seen life through a different lens, braver, more honest. I published my first book on a quiet fall. Not a bestseller, no billboards, just a slim book humbly on shelves of indie bookstores. At the small launch, when the last person left, I stood in the empty room, hearing the faint hum of fluorescent lights, and thought of the path that brought me here. Some steps shared, some alone. All necessary. Callum wasn't there that day, but he sent a photo. A Seattle road, sunlight slanting through trees. Proud of you, the message read. I smiled. No more pain. Just a thin line of light through my heart. I taught an intro writing class in spring. Students sat in a circle, young faces with hope and fear. I told them about writing from the truest place, about not avoiding stories that make you tremble. I didn't name Callum, but I spoke of a love that taught me to see. At class end, a student stayed, asked, "Do you believe loves that don't last still matter?" I nodded. Yes, they teach us to become someone who can last with ourselves. That summer, I returned to New York for another reading. This time after Callum and I met to walk in the park. No coffee, no rush, just parallel steps. We talked about ongoing projects, new people in life, old habits left behind. Sitting on a bench, Callum took out his camera, shot the sky turning orange. "I still capture light," he said, smiling. "And I replied, "still write about it." We parted with a warm hug, not lingering. No regrets. I walked to the hotel with a sense of fullness, as if a circle had closed right. That night, I reopened the first pages I'd written about Callum. Awkward words, heavy emotion. I didn't edit. I just read and thanked my old self for daring to love like that. Daring to believe another could brighten my days, and daring to accept that light could change shape over time. If anyone asks me now what love is, I won't speak of promises or destinations. I'll speak of September mornings, coffee scent, unconscious touches, hard conversations, kind releases. I'll say about choosing each other when scared, and choosing to let go when needed. I'll say love is a skill. The more you learn, the more you live. Some afternoons, I still pass a coffee shop and remember Callum. Not a pulling back memory, but one placing me in the present. Remembering to know how far I've come. Remembering to smile. I believe somewhere Callum is living well, capturing photos that make others pause, choosing days bright enough for himself. And I believe between us, there's a thread that doesn't need holding to exist. This story ends here, not because there's nothing left to say, but because enough has been said. Enough to be grateful. Enough to move on. And if you're listening to these final lines, I hope you remember. Some people enter our lives not to stay, but to light up a part of us we never dared see. When they leave, that light doesn't go out. It stays in how we love, how we live, and how we see the world. The days with him were brighter. And because of that, my days since have been too.